Hey there, everyone. Today we are going to focus on creating multiple cases for a model in Excel. There are two typical ways you can do this. The first is using the formula offset. The second is using the formula combination, index, and match. Offset is typically the simpler but more limited way to do this. Index match is a much more versatile function, but when you're brand new to modeling, can be a little bit daunting at first. So we're going to spend some time today going through both methods and the advantages and disadvantages. Let's first start with why are we trying to create multiple cases? So right now we have a situation where we're projecting revenue going forward. The yellow and blue indicates a number that's manually entered. The black text indicates a formula. So historically, this business grew 10% from 19 compared to 20. Moving forward, we're saying that the company will grow at 10% a year on the top line. The way we're expressing that is the formula for growth using the percent change that we input. So the variable here is the percent change. Say we want to look across multiple cases to see what multiple scenarios would look like for the business. What we are going to do is first take this section of the model and we're going to copy it over here. The reason we're going to do this is we want to be able to project multiple times using the same starting set of data. So from 2019 all the way to 2024, we're going to copy and paste. The reason we take 2019 is because our growth rate for 2020 is based on this value, or our growth in revenue, rather. So we're going to set this equal. What we are going to do is anchor to D. I'll show you why we do that in a moment. So the reason that we're anchoring is when I copy this over again for another new case, I keep the same values here and I don't have to relink it every time. So now we're going to get into how to pull the data from these cases into this section, which will become our main model if we were to build a full model here. First things first, let's differentiate these numbers so we'll know if we're pulling the right case. So we're going to have this stay 10%. We'll just cut this in half. 5%. Call this the upside case and this the median case. Now, we need to create a formula in these cells that will pull either these values or these values, depending on which case I select. We're going to change the format to look like a formula. So version 1 is using offset. Offset is a very straightforward formula. You type offset, and what you'll see here is the different data items it's asking for. The bolded one is the item you're on. To move on to the next item, you enter a comma. So the first thing it wants is the reference. Where are we starting from? What offset does is you pick a place to start, and then you can move up or down a certain number of rows and right to left a certain number of columns. We need to start from the cell we are in. So we'll select cell E16. That's our base. Then for rows, we're not going to move up or down at all here, so we just skip it by hitting comma again. Now we want cells. The number of cells we want is however many we need to go from here to the right enough to capture this value, 2020. So the number, I believe, is 7. How do we know when they're all 10? Make that 0, make that 0, perfect. Right, that was just a little check. So now that we're pulling, offset has been set up, we can pull data across the different years. because for each cell, it's 7 from the current cell we're on. So what does that look like? 5, 4, 3, 2. It's a pretty straightforward formula. Now, how do we expand that to multiple cases? Well, what we are going to do is create a new section, selector, case in use. We're going to pick a number. So let's say we want case 1, which is our upside case. I'm going to enter 1, and then I'm going to take this cell here and multiply it by the cell we're offsetting by, and anchor that cell. So here's what we've done. In a normal situation where there's no additional math being done, I am pulling data 7 cells to the right of what's in this column here for row 22. So I'm pulling this value in this cell, I'm pulling this value in this cell, and so on. But what if I wanted to get a farther case, case 2 or case 3? As long as the distance between here and here is the same as the distance between here and here, I can just change the case number and it will multiply the cells I'm offsetting by the case. So what that means is now it's not pulling 7 cells to the right, it's pulling 14 cells to the right. Using this, I can add cases going right however long I would like, and it will keep picking it up as long as I change the number of the case. Now, there are some inherent problems with this formula. The first one being you have to make sure you're being diligent about the cases that you're adding. You can't, for instance, on accident, add a new case that's 2 cells away. So now instead of 1 column in between the 2 cases, I've got 2 columns. When I go to input case number 3, it should say growth is at 50%. Instead, it says growth is at 10, because now it's pulling 1 cell behind and my formulas will be off. The other thing that this doesn't handle very well is if an individual case is projecting a longer hold period. That's something that might become more common in a world where holding periods are typically starting to trend a little bit longer, but you also have situations like COVID where someone might have been planning to exit this year, but now feels as though they might need to wait 2 to 3 years for the company to fully recover. In that situation, say in my medium case, I wanted to add another 2 years. Well, now this is going to mess up this formula for pulling from case 3. And it makes the offset formula altogether not work unless I add that number of years to every case, even if most of the cases that data is blank. This is doable, but it can be a pain and it can make formatting a little bit harder. That's why I don't prefer to use the offset. Now we're going to talk about the formula you'll see me use more commonly, index match. So index and match are 2 formulas that do 2 different but complementary things. First, index. What this formula will do when I type it in is it asks me to select an array or a group of cells like this. And then it wants me to identify a variable in a different row or column that will let them know what to select. What does that mean? Well, here's an example. I use index because I want to find the growth rate in this case for 2022. So I highlight this array of cells And now I want to match it to 2022 over here. So I type comma, and now I have the option to select the row number. So it's asking me if I want to select something from here to identify the data. That's not super usable in this situation, but it can be in larger data review, which is something I'll cover in a later video. For now, we're going to skip it. We're going to hit comma again. The next thing we're going to do is match data going along here, which is what we're looking for. We're trying to find 2022 in this row of data. So we type match. The first thing match asks me to do is pick the year I'm looking for. I'm looking for 2022. And in the array I'm looking, it's here. The final thing I'll do once I hit comma is it asks, do I want to have an exact match, or am I okay with it being greater than or less than? I'm going to type 0. In most situations, you don't need to think deeper about this than just selecting 0. Then I close my parentheses, close it one more time, and hit enter. Now these are all 10. How do we know if we're right? Okay, we are correct. So I can use this formula across these cases to pull the growth rate for each year by matching it to the year here. However, that only works for one case. How do we use multiple cases? Well, this is where index and match can get a little bit more complicated than offset. What I want to do is add an additional couple items of data that will help me identify specifically both what year and what case I'm trying to pull from. So let's first add a column that inputs the case number. We're saying this is case 1. We're going to steal this formatting. We're going to set all of these. We're going to set all of these equal to case 1. And for this, we're going to make it case 2. The next thing we'll input is the year. 2019 won't be important. I just like to have the first input to be the farthest data to the left of whatever section I'm looking at. But this won't be very useful. The third thing, we're going to add a row by hitting Shift spacebar, Control space, is number and year. And that is taking this and combines them as a string. So this is not a number anymore. It's taking 1 and 2019, and instead of adding them or multiplying them, it's just mashing them together. And I'm going to drag that to the right. Now I'm going to copy this formula and do the exact same thing over here. This one goes out a little farther. One more time for case number 3. Now, how do we use that? So we are going to put index, and what we are looking for here is the growth rate for 2020. We are going to start right here and hit Shift and then drag out to the right. We want to give ourselves a lot of extra space, so when we add in extra cases, we have some more room before we have to adjust the spreadsheet. I'll go to AZ. Now I am going to lock the formula at the letter, but not the number. That way, if I copy the formula down, I'll be able to have this move to whatever row I'm copying down for. So say I want to copy this formula to pull the margin for gross profit or the percent change for operating expense. I'm allowing myself to do that by only locking the letter. Now, we're going to hit comma. We don't need anything from this side, the up and down, so we're going to hit comma again. We're going to pick and match. What we are looking for is this year and this case. Actually, I have that order backwards, so we're going to cut that, paste it, and add the ampersand. Now, for this situation, I'm going to lock the case because that'll always be what we're pulling. But for the year, we're only going to lock the height, because as I drag this formula down, I don't want it to move downwards, but as I pull different years, I want E to change to F, so we can pull 2021 when I pull it to the right, and so on. My lookup array has to match the same length as this. So it's pulling, if it is shorter, for instance, it will pull at a different data point. That's hard to conceptualize, but if you ever mess with this formula, you'll understand pretty quickly what I'm talking about. So for the lookup array, what we can do is copy this formula, but instead of 28, we want it to be 14 for the row number. And then for this, we always want this to be where we're searching to pick which number from here we want. So this, we're gonna put the dollar signs both next to the number and the letter. Then comma, 0. Again, we want an exact match, and we close it. So now let's see how this works. Right now, it should be pulling from case 3, and they're saying case 3 would be 10% in all years. Well, let's test that. 50, 25. This is an amazingly growing company. 12, 10, 5. Okay. So now we know the formula is working properly. What if we select case 2? Perfect, it's capturing things correctly. So the index and match, as you can see, is a little bit more nuanced of a formula and requires some editing of the sheet to use its full potential. Offset, much simpler formula, pretty easy to wrap your head around, but can be a lot more challenging if you have to get more artistic with the modeling that goes into it. I hope this helps. Please feel free to comment with any questions or reach out to the channel directly. Thank you.